introduce myself yet. So, welcome to Game Framing, the structures that shape our games. I'm Chris Totten. I am a game artist in residence at American University. I'm also the head of the DC International Game Developers Association chapter. And I am, so in this talk we are going to talk about our research. I should also introduce Josh McCoy.
Okay, I will talk about myself. Hi, I am Josh McCoy. I'm an assistant professor at American University, and in the computer science department and in the game lab. I'm an indie game developer and artificial intelligence researcher, especially applied to some social sciences like sociology and anthropology.
So what we're going to do, I guess this was what I was trying to say before. What we're going to do is discuss games as, I guess, we see them, through the frameworks that we have built throughout our own research. And then, we're going to try to open it up as much as we can and see if that sparks or if that lights any light bulbs for anybody, or if anybody else has some interesting viewpoints through which they look at games. So I guess let's get started. So I have a master's degree in architecture, and long story short, the way I got to the game industry was I got out of grad school, did my thesis on game development actually, used game design tools for architectural design processes, and worked in architecture firms for a little while, and had the opportunity to use the software that I knew, 3D Studio Max and all that other stuff that's normally used also in the game industry. Had an opportunity to use it in the game industry, and then eventually became a teacher in it. So I recently published a book called An Architectural Approach to Level Design, and what I did with this was took a lot of what I learned as an architect or as an architecture major. I never got my stamp. But as an architectural professional, and synthesized it with the process of level design. So when I talk about some of that stuff, it's not just, when you, I think whenever I see industry-based level design stuff, I always see, well, here's some pictures of cool buildings I saw, or here's some pictures of historical ruins or things like that. And the trouble that I always have with that is there's this odd definition of where environment art ends and level design begins. And I think that's a big miscommunication, especially when you get into teaching level design. Josh, you and I were talking about this earlier, where level design becomes either about environment art. So, oh, I'm a level designer and I've made this cool space, but it's really just kind of a pretty room or some pretty environment, pretty backdrop. And then you get this, the other not so great element of when you hear about like teaching level design is when it gets into software. Because so many books on level design start off as, we're going to talk about how levels are designed, and then by the end it's just a 3D Max manual. And I'm picking on 3D Max a lot, but you know what I mean. It's like a 3D art manual, or a Unity manual, or a UDK manual, or something to that effect. All these are either software art programs or game engines. So I took a different approach. I was like, what's missing is why space works, why height works, why cover systems work in games. So that's a framework that I started to look at, was how can we define games as, and granted this works a lot with games that are spatial, games that are mostly UI focused, there's a little bit of this. But let's look at games as design spaces. And it's really useful because think about, is there anybody who either makes games in any sense, like, you do not have to be a professional game developer, like, but has tinkered around with Game Maker? Is anybody in here like that? Okay, cool, great. So, well, some of you can probably commiserate on some of these then. When you have to build something, do you try to be really purposeful? Or are there those moments, I've observed them. Let's say if you're working with a terrain editor, somebody will be like, oh, terrain editor, well, outside's not really designed, so I'm just gonna it's a hill. Okay, then there's some trees, that looks kind of cool. Okay, there's my outside. And they don't really think of it as design space. And what I'm looking at is what are all the deliberate choices that somebody made to guide you, the player, through the space. And I think that's the biggest thing for me when you look at game design is how does this become a conversation between the designer and the developer and the player. So I'm big on the idea of visual communication. And this goes actually into a lot of graphic design history, spatial psychology, learning psychology. I've done research into Montessori learning, into constructivist learning methods, behavior theory, things like that, and applied it to game environments. So, trying to think about games as structured spaces, as a player, if that's something you're interested in. One thing that I always tell people is try to keep a game journal. Try to keep an idea, keep a journal with you as you play some games. Try to think about how you as a player look. What is the thing that drew your eye? Here's a question you can ask yourself when you're playing a game. Have you ever been confused? Actually, raise your hand if you've ever been playing a game and been confused. Like, what do I do next, right? Or where do I, keep your hands up if it's, where do I go next? Okay. Has it ever, when you figure out where you're going, been someplace that's like, why the heck is the main path over there? Yeah. So that's bad level design. They've done a bad job of getting you through the space, of guiding you through the space. I always tell people keep a game journal, use that for analysis, and learn how the game creates that conversation with you. I guess I could go on more, but I'd like to hear from you about your system. That's kind of an overview of what the goals of my system are. I'm going to go into more specifics as we go on. But yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Okay, I guess we'll just do some overviews.
Yeah.
So my area is particularly takes the tagline of expressive intelligence. So it's the confluence of art, technology, and design. So what we want to do there is make games more meaningful, more deeply playable in a variety of senses. So think about what games we're good at. We're really good at physics. We're really good at 3D world modeling. We're really good at graphics. We're getting almost to photorealism. So we understand this 3D geometry, this Euclidean view of the world. We really understand that. We do that really well. Our processors are designed to do that very quickly, and it's all things that we know, come from science, come from this language of mathematics that we understand so well. But what we don't understand so well are stories. We don't understand narrative. We don't understand the more human qualities of gameplay. We don't understand the more intangible things, like the architectural design things, like Chris was talking about. Our systems aren't good at processing that. They don't do that automatically for us. We rely on humans to do this. So what does that mean? What are if you look at that space of things that we know how to do well in this 3D world, this mathematical box, you have this set of forces that look very much like games we have today. You get your FPSs, you get your 3D adventure games, you get your Legend of Zelda games. They're all great games, but they're in that box. What if we had things that were outside the box? What if we wanted a game that was really about storytelling? What if our role-playing games, you could actually play the roles instead of going through dialogue trees or going through an area where you walk through town and talk to characters and then go through a single-threaded dungeon where you have to defeat a boss, you get a cutscene, which is your narrative payoff, which you cannot interact with, and then go to the next town, right? Standard classic beads on the string. And that's our role-playing games. That's a far cry from live-action movie, right? It's a far cry from like reaching bloodlines. It's a far cry from even playing with foam, Nerf bats, hitting your friends while playing medieval games. It's not there. That story level, that deeply playable social.
It's even far from D&D.
It's far from D&D. It's far from all the tabletop adventures.
Yeah.
So there's this disconnect here between what computers do well, what we can make computers do well with our systems that we as humans have designed, and playable stories. So that's where I focus my energies.
And the theme that we're advocating for is, there's this book by Anna Anthropy, a famous game developer, and not her manifesto-y book, which is a great book, but there's a book that I use as a textbook called Game Design Vocabulary, and the first chapter, you should all read it. The first chapter of this book is about how we're doing this wrong. To illustrate this, I was listening to NPR on the ride home one time, and there was a book review about a famous food writer, and it was given by a friend of the famous food writer, and it wasn't as much a review as a reflection on this person's life and talking about her friend and the meals they had shared together. And I'm hearing them talk about food, and I'm like, my God, we have a better language to talk about food than we do about video games, than multi-billion-dollar-a-year industry. All we can really do is graphic, sound, control, fun factor, and then how much out of 10. And in the case of certain websites, who shall remain nameless, really a range from 7.5 out of 10 to 10 out of 10.
We also talk about mechanism and call it genre.
Yes, yeah. Talk about mechanism and call it genre.
You were in this bucket.
Let's acknowledge, but let's not go down that dark path. Not without James Portnoy out here.
Unfortunately, it wasn't useful.
Yeah. Well, and so. But again, that goes into the really bad language. I mean, has anybody really thought about games as cultural artifacts? So think about this. These very commercial things. There's games as graphic design. Graphic design 100 years ago was posters. That was a lot of the famous graphic. Oh God, what's his name? Toulouse-Lautrec. He has, you might have heard his name, and you might be like, it's a famous artist's name. Well, a lot of his best work was poster design. And he changed the graphic arts by just using good artistic techniques in poster design. But they were commercial contracts. Let's look at games today. I mean, really think about what people are going to say about games today. There's going to be American brutalism or something like that. Something where it's there's a lot of kids. These Americans must have been insane. Mass murderers, all of them. Because all of our art in that part of this has been incredibly violent. I'm not doing the games are violent talk. I'm just saying, this is what the rhetoric of games has become conflict based on enemies.
Obsession with dysfunctional or dark futures or alien.
Yeah, I don't live in the dystopian
version.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that. I think fundamentally, it's easier to write things that are impulsive.
Yeah.
Size up and act quick, and that's the right answer.
Yeah.
And it's easier to do that kind of thing. And the only situations that works for are life-threatening conflict.
Yeah.
React fast, and that's the right decision.
Now, I'm not saying those we should all stop playing those games or anything, because heck, I like them.
Push games equals skill.
Yeah.
So that you can, because guys who play games want to be ranked on the level. There's
Yeah.
But chess is a violent game too, it's a war simulation, but it's not as violent because you're not distracted, because you have to think of different consequences and take your time and deliver it.
And so the
Fast
goal,
decision games tend to be more violent.
and so the goal here becomes, you know, knowing that, and I mean, really, if anybody's been reading any game news in the last 3 weeks, you know that there's been some upheaval over what is a gamer, who's a gamer, what are, you know, what are games, why are games like this, et cetera, et cetera. So think about this. Now we have to improve. We can talk about game framing. How do we start to redefine how we structure games? And here's the cool thing, everybody. A thing that I always do when I am teaching students is I always say to them, like, look, so when I teach game history, I will go, people will say, oh, how far up are we going to go? And I'm like, till the day that we are, like, whenever we get to today, it'll be today. You know, I'm going to do everything but just bring in a mirror and be like, hi, look, okay, we're just going to watch yourself doing game stuff today. The reason being is that as a field of study, game studies are really, like, they were formally declared a thing in 2001. The game industry, the video game industry, has only existed for about 42 years. Games are ancient. You know, there have been games found in Mesopotamian tombs. But, you know, games as something that are studied at the level that we work at are very young. And what this means is that it's open. It's open season. You know, there aren't people with game studies degrees teaching game studies right now. We don't have game studies degrees. You know, so there are lots of opportunities for people to comment, and either through academics, through blogging, through YouTube channels, through indie gaming. And I'm not even talking about, like, you have to spend a year and a half on successful, financially viable, like, Meat Boy indie game. You could do, like, we were just talking in the What in the Indie talk about, I made this thing in a weekend and it's 3 minutes long and it does this. You know, you can do this sort of micro hobbyist indie game and then you could send it off to someone.
We got a bunch of clients again. It's
Yeah.
Valley Dogs.
Yeah. Yeah, everything on Twine, exactly. So you can add your own spin onto the game. So going back to some of our research in particular, one thing that I advocate for, again, I use the discussion of games as a conversation a lot. I was very heartened to hear that other writers have done the same. So, you know, somebody that we work with, Lindsay Grace, he actually uses game verbs to talk about interesting game, persuasive game properties, so making a game that makes an argument. And because the verbs of a game, Mario jumps, Link explores, you know, Samus shoots, things like that, those are verbs, those mechanics are game verbs. And suddenly we get games as a rhetoric, or as a rhetorical system. Well, take that into architecture. I can start creating a visual language for how the player interacts with mechanics. So what does it mean? Okay, who here has played Portal? This is an incredibly rhetorical game. So what does it mean in Portal? And I'm looking to you guys for this. When you see a slanted wall panel slightly pushed out high above your head and then a pit in front of you, what do you do? What?
You look at the panel.
Well, you look, but there's a pit in, well, okay, I should clarify this. So there's a pit in front of you that you can get across, but it has a floor at the bottom that can take portals. So you have to get across the pit, but the pit itself is safe. Like, what?
So then you jump, you fall on the wall in front of you, so
Yeah.
above that, now you jump down and curl.
Yeah. It's the momentum puzzle, right? So But once you understand that that's the momentum puzzle, how many times do you see that orientation? Like when you see that orientation of pick with safe bottom and panel pushed out, what does your brain think? Momentum puzzle, exactly. Visual language, architecture, architectural types too. Another thing you can think about is Dragon Quest. So actually it's funny when I wrote this, I was like, oh, if I'm gonna think about a JRPG, I'm probably gonna think Final Fantasy, and then I cited the crap out of Dragon Quest. So I'm like, I have a much better appreciation of Dragon Quest because that's just what popped in my head when I was writing. So Dragon Quest, you need somebody revived. What do you look for? Dragon Quest players out there, anybody? A church, right? How do you tell the church from the other buildings? The cross. Or the whatever symbol is being used to denote the church in that particular game. That's visual language. And that seems really basic, but again, when you think about games as a set of deliberate design choices, you know, who here played BioShock Infinite? So the beginning of BioShock Infinite to me is really cool because it's this straight path and you can deviate it from it in some places, but it's usually kind of a straight path. You know, it's not straight physically, but it's linear, right? In gameplay terms. So, excuse me. Let's think about, you know, for those of you who haven't played for a while, all the places that you're supposed to go are orange. All the doorways you're supposed to go are orange. The lighting in this area of the game is predominantly bluish purple, and then the little side areas you can duck into to get some extra goodies are usually like purple reddish. So what does that do? Well, you have contrasting colors highlighting where you're supposed to go. And then, you know, analogous colors sort of saying like, there's something here, but that's not where you should be focusing your attention. So there's all these tricks. You can suddenly think about games as these ways, that, you know, the way in which the game interacts with you non-explicitly. You know, so that's kind of a lot of what I've done a lot of research into is how games teach. How do games use this to teach, like the momentum puzzle? How do games introduce new mechanics to you? Spoiler alert, one at a time. You know, one at a time, usually if it's a new mechanic, you usually want to see it in isolation. And then you'll encounter it again, but it'll let you mix and match these things that you've seen. So eventually you learn momentum by itself, and then suddenly you're doing momentum plus the little light ball thing, plus, you know, turrets and everything else, you know, later on. So it's interesting when you look at games like that, you know, sort of the development of those systems. And that's where we can really start to sort of mark the history of this medium as cultural artifacts. Is how we develop those tools.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely great. So like this speaking in this visual way is very cool and important. So you go in your book and you actually give examples and like show like what's going on in this perspective. Yeah, right. So I haven't actually had a chance to read your book yet.
There you go.
Oh, there we go.
You have 20 minutes.
There's a good. Yeah, exactly. It's right there.
Well, and okay, so here's the other thing that I think, based on the idea of how can we look at games in the broader cultural framework, and I think this will start to get into your favorite area of expertise too, is where we start to compare games to other things. Because I think another element of what we've been not great at is we've taken games so often for themselves. And whether that be because, you know, I don't know, maybe I think games been written about for so long by themselves, but also I feel like it's not the best direction to go, but like the stereotypical gamer is somebody that doesn't know about other stuff. feel like games have been treated as these lowbrow objects, but we can do so much more. And I almost, and I think this is where I get into the like gamers fight for your medium. You know, bring your brand to it.
Yeah.
You know, because we can compare them to other cultural works. You know, like Joyce was talking about procedural poetry generation. Like, that's really interesting to me.
Yes, let me bring this back to the mid-90s, okay? So, you know, Terminator 2 video games are out everywhere. But did you see Your American Beauty, the video game? Not really. How do you make that a video game? Like, what does that even mean? Like, how do you play that story? How do you impart that level of interpersonal character relationship in a playable way that's not a movie? Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's pretty much
Vote them off.
a toy world. I mean, that's the ideal sort of toy world simulator.
Yeah.
Oh man, AAA doing reality TV, all that.
Okay, Jersey Shore.
Jersey Shore.
Oh, that'd be great.
That's a little easier to talk about. It's the same script.
Even though, yeah. Well, I think it's Jersey Shore on Second Life, so.
There you go. Well,
I've seen
and
that.
this is funny too because this is where board games get right. Like, there's a Moby Dick card game. It was on Kickstarter. I backed it. Has anybody seen this game or played it? Go check it out. It's awesome. But what it does right is it doesn't say like, okay, everybody, we're going to stop and we're going to have Queequeg, you know, build his coffin right now. You are on the boat. You hire crewmen. You fight whales, and there's mechanics for fighting whales, and it puts you in the mechanics of the world, and then you kind of generate the story from it. Who here's played a game called Diplomacy? Ooh. Yeah, okay. For the long story short, Risk Without Dice. Made by a company up in Baltimore. Or they used to be up in Baltimore. But it's pre-World War I politics, European politics, a game. And you never at any point say, okay, everybody, it's 1914, Franz Ferdinand is dead, and then now we start World War I. No. You have to wheel and deal with each other, and World War I starts whenever the heck it does, probably in 1902. The game starts in 1901.
It's a little.
I've seen fights break out. It's fantastic. Or, one last example, Doom, the board game. Like Frank Herbert's Doom. It was a board game made by Avalon Hill, so it takes like 8 hours to play. But it is the perfect rule set of that book. Like, you are the faction you choose from the book. You choose like one of several, you know, families or factions or organizations, and that is, you have their powers, and you have to go mine spice and fight each other and do all this stuff, and there's treachery and everything, but it makes, again, you never say, okay, Dr. Yui's going to betray the Atreides, you know? No, you play the world, and that's what I think is so cool about these, is, you know, when you talk about sort of narrative generation of
Exactly.
games,
Yeah, so playing the world. That's a great phrase to use. So what I'm going to talk about is just a thing that's it's orthogonal to the level design, where you have visual language. You want to learn how to use the mechanics that the player has. You want to show them the proper way to use it, or guide them through the level through your visual design. Well, that sort of is assuming that you have these mechanics, these preset ways to interact with the world. Now, what I kind of want to do is break that. I want to make more things actually interactable, to make that palette of what you can do larger. So, narrative, social interaction. So, if you think about JRPGs, they're dialogue games, right? I mean, pretty much you play Mass Effect, you get one of 3 options, and then maybe sometimes a mere welcome down, like Star Wars: The Old Republic, let's say that's it. And that's like the extent of the modeling of your relationship with the world. Is like the mistake you make by going down this path instead of this path, and your light enemy. That's it. I want to break that. So I want to draw an analogy. So let's play physics games, Hegel, Angry Birds, stylized physics, stylized models of doing physics. What had a similar model for social interaction, say at the prom. Could you make a continuous model of things you can do at the prom to open up the game space there? Is there a stylized model of sociology that you can use, that you can run with, of character interaction that you could, that would open up a space of possibilities past that, the dialogue trees? That's the question I'm interested in. That's what I'm tackling. So the question is that, so part of the answer is, we've had some success in doing this. So IGF 2012, me and a team of 4 other people, plus a few executive producers, made a game called Prom, which was all about doing this more open, more continuous, more sandbox style social interactions between characters. So, the characters would think right at the, like this abstraction level of social relationships. It's sort of like a symbol. So, we have, the cheating rule. So, if I dated you, and then you went and dated someone else after that, that's cheating. The characters can detect that. That's the simple game state detection. That's a simple rule that can tell you when you're cheating. So now the cheating flag is on, and you can write rules that use that. You can get complicated. You can go like the knight in shining armor rule. Say that one character has a crush on another character. That same character also has an enemy. So let's say the person that character had a crush on is mean to your enemy. They were just your knight in shining armor. They took care of your bully. And then now you can crush on them even more. So it's that roundabout reasoning that you don't see that even in The Sims, and they still speak in gibberish Simlish. You don't see that roundabout reasoning in JRPGs. You don't see it in Western RPGs. Most people you talk to in Second Life don't think that hard. So that's this level of deeply playable, this level of characters thinking more deeply about the non-physical world, which they're in, their social world, their character-driven world that we want to tackle. We want to embed in our game systems, like the game Facade. Facade? Yeah.
Actually, you demonstrated them in this here.
Oh, great. Yeah, no, Facade's awesome. That was the dude who did Facade, Michael Tias. That's my mentor. So I'm very in the vein of Facade. Facade's a love of mine.
My question was actually about all that. So first off, this technical question, how does it work? How are they able to do that? I've played it, I know how it works, but how do they build it?
Okay,
and then my second question would be, how easy would that be to abstract it out to other situations like the ones you're describing?
Oh man, thank you for introducing the first chapter of my dissertation. So first off, to set the stage, Facade was an interactive drama released a few years ago, where you are a player. You enter this 3D environment, this world, this apartment where your college friends. So this is a few years after college. They've been married for a while. They invite you over for a dinner party. First time you've seen them in a long time. What you don't know is their dinner party. That's the night their relationship is going to fall apart. They're going to have serious issues that night, and you are in the middle of it. So to interact with this game, you actually type in what you want to say in natural language, like you would type a sentence, like you would write it inside the Word document. And it parses that and understands it. So this is technology component number 1, natural language understanding. So it has a rule-based system of looking at what you put in and reducing that down into a few dialogue acts that the system understands. So like greeting, insult, compliment. It reduces these things down to who did these dialogue acts to. So that's component number 1, getting the information in. Number 2 is like doing something with it, right? So you have the listen to what the player says, and the classic Chris Crawford listen, think, speak. So that was the listen. The think part goes to a reactive planner called Able. And that reactive planner looks at the input and has all of these different behaviors going on for all these characters, all competing for doing the next thing. And it, by virtue of input, by what it just determines how you just interact with the system through the natural language input, decides what to do next, decides if the character should have a fight, it decides if the character should offer you a drink, all of these different things. And so that for progresses, and on top of that, it speaks by having the characters play animations and position themselves in the world, and rapidly planners go away. Sorry if I'm being a little too techy. I'm an AI guy. But one of the more important parts about the system is the drama manager, where it actually manages how you go through the story. It's like this middle level thing that happens that keeps the story going on a plot. Yeah.
When you worked on this, was your idea that you were targeting social interaction with AI characters as a core game mechanic, as the point of playing the game, or the idea is to challenge the player to get to a certain outcome that they desire story-wise? Or were you thinking about how when you're playing other games where story is part of the game, like an RPG, like I'm on Dragon Age, it was like a story was like a choice tree that's trying to augment that with something more realistic? And if that's the case, I had a follow-up question.
Okay, for prom week, so both of those were real concerns we're making. For prom week, the high school prom social simulation, we were much more interested in exploring this idea of AI-based game design. So taking the mechanics, the affordances you get from the AI system, and making a game that complements those mechanics. You develop the game, you see the AI system, you look at it, you see what's working, what's not working, you change the AI system. The AI system gives you more affordances, you change the game. Iterative cycle of refinement, making both systems better. That's what we were going after. But you just can't give someone like a sandbox and have it be a compelling experience in a lot of cases. Like even SimCity has levels, right? You just don't go in and play sandbox, although that's a fun mode, but that's not your entry level mode. So you want to tell stories. So we gave story goals for characters. First of all, we based the story on the character. Like Chloe's big day, and she finds the romance she wants at prom. Can she finally shake off that bully? So we set up a story. We give particular goals you can meet. The more of the goals you meet, the cooler the prom, and you have a prom night.
So actually that goes into my research too, because when you have a big system like that, so I'll use Minecraft. Minecraft is a great example of this. You can do a lot of stuff in Minecraft. You can combine a lot of things together in Minecraft. If you play Minecraft, but like when you turn on Minecraft for the first time, you're probably playing the mode where you have a set of goals, which is like, okay, bad things are going to come out at night. Get yourself ready for the bad things. And usually the first night that's like big goal. But you can, by putting this together, learn some basic mechanics, and then you eventually learn crafting, and then you get a couple other things going. And then, Penny Arcade had a great comic about this, where you start day one and you punch some trees, and then by the end of the 2 or 3 days in, you have like a fort and a bunch of weapons to fight stuff, and now you're making a stadium. And then eventually, that's not even a problem, and you're like, I need to make my pixel art masterpiece of the Black Mage from Final Fantasy, thank you, zombies go away. And then you're dropping monsters and that you want to fight, like black dragons and things like that. So the game employs what's called shaping, and I'm sure, again, when you're talking about these little narrative quests, this is kind of what you do. Yeah. So who here has ever, I'm not going to say played golf, but even just like learned how to swing a golf club? Okay. So when you learn how to swing a golf club, if you're being taught the right way, you are going to be taught like this. Okay, first, here's a golf club, hold it right. Okay, great. You have held it correctly. All right, now stand correctly. Okay, feet shoulder width apart, golf club here. X amount of distance in front of you. All right, have you done that? And then you go through the steps, but it's sort of like the name game a little bit, where it's you have to do this new step, but you have to employ all the steps that you learned before that in sequence, and then employ the new step. Well, that's what Minecraft does. It kind of shows you some of the basics, and then gives you some of that, and then you get to play with this cool sandbox world. And it sounds like, that's kind of the same driver there, where you have this big world, and then you have to, the designer teaches you how to get used to it. It's kind of the opposite of what we were talking about in the last panel. We were talking about games where it's just like, like welcome to my player, and it's just like hard right away. But those are really simple games. Complex games, you have to ease them into it. Who here's ever played Dwarf Fortress? Dwarf Fortress is notoriously difficult because it's like, welcome to Dwarf Fortress, all of it. Go on. Dwarf Fortress it up.
From geology down to muscles in your fingers.
Yeah, exactly. And you're all drunk. Yeah, that's like, it's not bad because Dwarf Fortress is awesome, but it's not, it turns people away. So, like, the book on how to, like, there are textbooks this size on how to play Dwarf Fortress. And that's a thing. There are all kinds of old war games that did that. But, that's a very different style of play. So it's interesting how you invent these complex systems, but then you almost have to introduce them in intricate ways to the player so that the player comes along for the ride, and then all of a sudden they're performing these cool actions, and again, navigating these social dynamics of problem.
And can I get you back to your point of language?
Yeah.
Because one of the things about Dwarf Fortress is if you want to talk to people who know Dwarf Fortress, you say, about your situation, you say, I don't want to end up barricaded in the room surrounded by my cats.
Yeah.
Again, you need a language.
Yeah. Well, and exactly, like, there is the visual language, and actually this goes into where you and I kind of cross over a lot, is where, if I'm talking about visual language, I am talking about discrete pieces and parts, and, the linguistic system of, we were talking about this earlier, height, a lot of places where where I see level design going awry is when they start inevitably saying like, well, height, but height for first-person shooters. Screw the genre of game. What is height? Okay, who here is afraid of heights? I get kind of freaked out when I'm in like a very ridiculously high up place. But if there's like a railing or some mechanism between me and the precipice, then suddenly it's advantageous to be up there, and this is like the first-person shooter thing. It's like, height is great for sniping, but, also terrifying when you're looking down into that deep pit. Half-Life does this a lot, Half-Life 2, because like they actually do the thing where then you get the precipice, and then they make the bad guy's architecture out of all vertical lines, so that when you're looking down into the precipice, the vertical lines create this sort of visual suction towards the perspective point, and it makes the height look even more terrifying. We have this dualistic relationship with this simple architectural element, but using that in such a way, using it as a piece, or as a linguistic piece, it doesn't have to be first-person shooters. I said that a bunch of times, but it can be a platformer, it can be, and I'm using the regular genre terms because it's the easiest to use for a quick panel, but you can apply it in many different places and have the same effects. So you start to think of that in terms of procedural world generation. We can have it be like height adds fear factor or something like that.
Exactly. This is like tropes.
Exactly, and symbols and architecture.
Oh, I'm writing notes. I said, yes, use height in a first-person shooter. It's someone 6'3" versus 4'8" because, about football things. Yes,
Yeah.
the little guy who carries hiding behind the linebackers and, whoa, wouldn't it be nice to add height? That's what you're getting there. Oh, no, I mean,
Twisted thinking.
Yeah, but again, we were talking about architectural types, like the church in Dragon Quest. That is a piece of linguistic. It's a linguistic element. So you could do like dynamic world generation based on like, well, I want to put my fear slider up, I want to put my, this down and things like that. So you could create these sort of interesting, dynamic, like, you could have a level react to how the player might be feeling at the time.
Yeah. Like in 3D worlds, you can even do like stance, like how's my body in relationship to this thing, and whether it's an open stance or a closed off stance, you can get a bit of information about how the player's feeling about the object.
Well, you can do stance, you can do like a heart monitor thing, like that thing Nintendo is like working on in the background somewhere, maybe. You could do Arduino, shields. There's a breathalyzer shield. You could do
Oh, I
like,
got a slide on that.
yeah. What kind of game could you? What kind of level design could you have procedurally generate as the person?
Even better, there's a calculator that says, not accurate enough, only for entertainment purposes. But it's actually labeled that. Wow, yes.
Well, hey, that's why we're here. So you can have. You see where these different types of frameworks start to create these dynamic conversations about how we see games and how then suddenly we can create new ideas for games. Yeah, we're almost past Q&A time. Well, we're there. Like, I'm interested in hearing, you guys have been asking us a lot about our stuff. What about you guys? Like, is anybody a biologist or something, and you're like, use that? Go.
I think of myself more as a writer. I'm very interested in literature.
Okay.
I don't produce anything, so I like to use that term.
Sure. Bob.
But I like to look for the patterns in games and the use of tropes. Because since games is a new thing, they port over a lot of the old things to explain it.
Yeah.
All the old tropes follow over. Why does Mario rescue his girlfriend? Because we have several thousand years of literature where that happens. And the person playing that game understands what they're supposed to do before the brain even gets angry at the cliche.
Yeah.
Because they understand it on a level deeper than their own consciousness.
Well, I would argue that no one ever played Mario Rescue Princess. Even you played Mario just like a friend playing Mario.
Well, no, I'm talking about Donkey Kong specifically here, not Super Mario Bros. Because that's one screen. You see the little cutscenes, such as it was, of Donkey Kong stealing the girl.
Yeah.
You're on a screen with you at the bottom, the big monkey and the girl at the top. What are you supposed to do? Well, get to the top.
But even beyond fight the dragon, get the girl, you can say, and I can cite so many games I've looked, including this one, unfortunately, that have the hero's journey as a trope. I mean, that goes even beyond just like the spray at the top as a girl screaming help into an actual structure of, okay, so something bad's going to happen in my hometown. Now I'm going to go on the epic quest that I didn't really want to go on before. Now I'm going to get protection from a supernatural element. Now I'm going to have to go through blah, 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 blah. Fight the Dark Lord, bring the boon back to my hometown and save everybody. Yeah, that's the hero's journey.
Yeah, but except usually in this video game, the kids do dumb matches when they listen to it and grow from it and there's no courses. So, I mean, it isn't really.
Well,
Actually,
yeah. But you know what I mean? Like that's a story structure trope that's used again and again, and it even almost to get kind of meta. How many game design books have a chapter on the hero's journey? Like,
Yeah.
I didn't mind about materiality, so I'm at least a little different. So.
Speaking of catharsis in games for a second, these games aren't generally thought of being very deep.
Yeah.
But when I was playing Grand Theft Auto 4, you think, oh, well, I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
Grand Theft Auto 4. But when you start doing bad things, and I should step back one step, I was just thinking of this game, I'm doing this to the game, it's not going to reach out back to me.
Yeah.
When you do bad things, Nico, the main character, starts saying stuff. If you listen, instead of beefly blowing up your fifth tank, those things sound like he's saying them to you.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this? I came from a country for a better life, and now I'm blowing up a whore. And the fact that he was actually saying these things, and it was reflecting on, like, he was disassociating himself from the action. Like, he didn't give me that tacit permission to do what I wanted. It was revoked. All of a sudden, I had to think about what I was doing. It was terrible.
Traumatized before NBC.
Yeah.
You traumatized before NBC. He's disassociated because he can't do what he's called.
It reminded me a lot as well as something you said earlier about how you're playing the environment or society, complete sandbox for narratives or whatever. It reminds me of being standing there. So
Yeah.
it makes you question why you're doing things.
Yeah.
It's a very good and introspective game.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I totally want to, while this conversation is going, I want to mention one of my favorite all-time games. That's Ultimate War,
Oh, yeah.
where you actually had your NPCs respond to your moral goings-on you could do a blind shopkeeper, buy all of those magic reagents, and drop in 1 gold when it would have costed you, 1,000 gold. He doesn't know, but your compassion meter, your all of your morality meters just dipped, right?
Yeah.
So it's like actually harming you and progressing the game when you do. Yeah.
It's like NPCs for yeah.
Well,
Applications,
those multi-axis, the multi-axis morality system. We were talking about the light side, dark side. Yeah, those are terrible. I mean, I love Star Wars games, and I love Jedi Knight. I played the crap out of Jedi Knight in the late 90s. And for that, it is bipolar. But Bully had a great morality system based on which clique you helped out. If you helped out the nerds, then the jocks would start coming after you and things like that. So, those
high school simulators.
exactly. Really, high school simulators are the future of video games, really.
So the past like Grand Theft Auto 2 games where if you had so much hurt,
Yeah.
they would actively attack you.
Exactly. So, are there any?
3 minutes left.
Yeah, 3 minutes. Yeah. One question left. Anybody? Anybody going to go out and be like, I'm going to take my knitting and use it as, fodder for understanding video games? Because you totally should. I'm being serious.
I've seen the game. You made her own crochet.
Yeah.
This exists.
One thing I want to look up, so we have the authority, language of flowers. The entire recording lesson where socially you are not allowed to meet anyone of the opposite sex unescorted.
Oh yeah,
So
these
therefore,
etiquette books are amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. On the language of flower. You send a flower arrangement to communicate so the parents don't know how serious it is, what you're breaking up, what you're saying, ooh, I'm getting ready to run away.
Oh my gosh.
Also, which colors and which kinds of flowers and how you make the arrangement.
That's such a
Child
So I think that's what the AU Game Lab should work on. That'd be awesome.
This is one of many really good examples of these.
Yeah.
Sort of like encoded
When you
culture.
said we need a language of games, we need a language like that. We
Yeah.
need something that people understand well enough. As soon as they see your game start up, that whole thing springs to mind.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the kind of experience I'm about to have.
Well,
It's
Is that what
telling me
genres do?
what to expect.
And even beyond that, I think what we need to do is train people to understand those languages better, because so many people understand games by that Game Pro, and I love Game Pro, but for its time, but by that Game Pro model of the graphics are good, this is good, that is good. Or people understand games as Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, and what's important is how they're doing.
Or Square games.
Yeah, what companies are doing, and that becomes the language of discussing video games intellectually. We need to start educating people on these alternative forms that we understand, and we need to make people literate in game design discussion. This is where game classes in schools come in handy. Game studies classes, game majors, things like that.
It's funny that you bring up the idea the ranking for the scores of certain axes, like rackets and stuff like that. People talk about games, because what I've found is that the older generation of gamers who have day jobs and who have to sort of balance playing games with other obligations and spend their own money on games, they typically do not think in those terms when I talk about games. They typically think about the gameplay experience, the kind of engagement that it requires, the kind of community around it, whatever makes it unique, because those are the discriminating factors. It's for a gamer like me, then these kind of things attract me, and they try to draw a relationship between games and other games so that they know what to play next.
Yeah.
The idea that you have an abundance of free time and your parents buy it for you, so you're just trying to figure out which games to put on the list for Christmas, kind of moves towards the what game is the best graphics, so I can lord it over my friends that I got Titanfall or whatever.
That's the difference from the source code you're blocking.
And that's partly driven by the social relationship between young people in their peer groups. I think partly because you don't play crack game, to play a good game. Who decides it's a good game? Game journalists. Or people on message journalists.
And this is actually, this goes into a thing that I've wanted to write for a long time, is on game writing. And I want to read Stephen King's On Writing first, so I can kind of like take that approach with it a little bit. But I think, yeah, game journalism, I love game journalism, but I see it as a utility. I don't see it as like game criticism. I think people call it game criticism way too often. Like, you know, we're game critics. You know, we write game criticism. But, you know, game, like criticism being academic breakdowns of media and cultural things.
Classic form of criticism.
Yeah, classic form of criticism. Not game ratings. But even then, like, the game raters are not, they're no Roger Ebert. Like, they do, you know, Roger Ebert had a film studies background and then got into, like, he made film criticism, you know, cool and used that productively. And I think we don't have that point yet in games where people are going to see, like, oh, so-and-so talks about games this way, and I want to hear what he has to say. Yeah, I don't think that's
Those kind of game ratings are classical.
Yes.
They're like the fashion news, like, it's okay to wear this fashion kind of not that, because this is what the real people who are cool know they're going to do. It's just that kind of thing. Like, so aiming for the
It
kids
requires
are so.
people who are consuming that stuff,
Yeah.
that
It's the
drive
kids are so,
advertising.
you don't want to be seen liking that game that's not cool. So here, we'll give you a pin.
Once you get to a certain age as a gamer, then that doesn't matter so much anymore, so you're not beholden to that kind of cliquish.
So we can break out a little bit on this, but we do have to transition to the next panel.
What's next, man?
It is Pimp My Tetris in an Altoids tin, making games and cases for Arduino game systems. Actually, this kind of piggybacks a little bit on the conversation we've been having, because it is about basically make your own game console. Not like a how-to by any stretch of the imagination, but a go here to figure out how to.
It's the way the indie hardware is going to be going, as opposed to the indie software.
Yeah. It's a different, even kind of indie than we're used to. It's the British way. It is, it's the British way.
Thank you for showing up and listening to your panel.
Yeah, thanks.